Good evening, everyone. This evening, I really want to cover white acceptance in the form of integration. For all too long, Black Americans have been assimilating into white culture. We are essentially colonized in our very well being. And for those who are now, quote unquote, not woke, and as the Republicans or the Republican Klansmen would like to say, that we're not awake and that they're trying to really demonize woke culture, that essentially all of these Black Americans are now being awakened of the current conditions that they're in. Now, we should have been woke a long time ago, but some things take more time for people than others. But it's important to understand that the state that we're currently in and that we've been seeking as a people white acceptance for a very long time. And that white acceptance comes in many different forms, but the major form that it has come in is integration. And the question you must ask yourself, has integration been profitable for Black Americans? Now, for a lot of immigrants, no matter what country you've come from, integrating into white culture after the back-breaking, blood shedding that the foundational Black Americans, quote unquote, U.S. freedmen has done for this nation and for other groups, yes, it's very, very profitable. But we must understand that people before us, great people like Malcolm X, has came and told us prior to that integration has solved nothing, it has done nothing. And maybe you are strongly affiliated politically with either the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, and not to be too political, that you may think that we've made some headways. No, we've made that headway because we have been unified in the decisions that we've been making as a group, not to be a monolith, but to have unity, because when you are united, you are stronger than you being divided. And integration has divided Black Americans more than anything else. Thus, the situation that we're currently in now. We're still the lowest group. We're still the poorest group. We're still the most demonized group. We're still the most criminalized group. We're still the group that's mostly incarcerated here in America. That is without a fact. Fair use, fair use, fair use.
The white power structure to slow down that struggle for freedom and human dignity uses tricks. 100 years ago, they could do it with chains. Today, they use tricks. And one of the tricks that they've invented is this token integration, to get Negro, so-called Negro leaders to accept a few token crumbs of integration that don't solve any problem for the masses of Black people in this country whatsoever, but it does make the hand-picked Negroes be satisfied to slow down the cry of the masses. And a good example of that is, as soon as the spirit of rebellion or revolution began to spread among the masses of Black people in this country, and they began to take an active part, and they showed that they weren't confined to this nonviolent approach, then the government or the power structure began to sit up and take notice. And now, as you said earlier, the president is talking about new legislation and to take it out of the streets and put it back in the courts. Why? As long as it's in the streets, it's in the hands of the masses of Black people who will not compromise or who cannot be bought out. But when you put it back in the courts, then that puts it back into the hands of the hand-picked Negro leaders, who will allow the judges and the other persons that are involved in this white power structure to slow them down. It's only a trick. And as long as the masses of Black people are involved in the struggle for freedom, not integration, but freedom and respect as human beings, respect as men, and show that they're willing to die to be respected as men, then the power structure sits up and takes notice. But as long as this mass element is led, and when I say led, I use led in quotes, actually contained by Uncle Tom Negro leaders who hold them back, who tell them turn the other cheek, and things like that, then the white power structure isn't worried at all. They're only worried when they know that the masses of Black people are ready to explode, and in exploding it will destroy some of the furniture in their house, and then they react accordingly.
So, what has integration done for Black Americans? Integration has stopped rebellion. Integration has stopped revolts. Integration has stopped unity. When you look at history, the reason why integration was even a thing is for us to get equal justice, equal peace, equality on all platforms, whether it be jobs, healthcare, education, the list goes on, family. But if you notice, nothing significantly has happened to Black Americans to put us on the same playing field as our white and Asian counterparts. We even have Hispanics economically above us, and their population has been increased, allowing by the white power structure, because we understand that majority of Hispanics that come to America, they label themselves as white. Now, you can go back and look at history of organizations like LULAC, who essentially fought for Hispanics to be labeled as white and not Mexican or Puerto Rican or Dominican or any of these other Latina or Latino Latinx groups. So this is very important, that white is a power structure, and that we at the totem pole, we're at the very bottom of the totem pole. And for a very long time, our leaders have been telling us, Francis Cress Welsing, Malcolm X has been telling us that integration has not helped Black America, even Dr. Claude Anderson. But we have not been listening to our leaders. So some of you might, oh, we're talking about separatism, or we're talking about setting ourselves apart. The problem is we do not do group economics. And if it's hurt us greatly, we're looking for white acceptance. White acceptance is a form of integration. Now, you may not see this in the form that I may see it. So again, I like to go to our late and great leaders, those who spoke very profoundly against white supremacy and against integration, because they understood that by dividing a people such as us, we're the most willing of any other race other than other people. Have you noticed that? Black Americans, we're so accepting of everyone else, where everybody else tries to exclude us. But we're not getting the picture. We're not understanding the power shift and paradigm of how America actually is operated. Maybe one day we'll wake up.
Another thing, when you say integration, it comes on the intermarriage too, right? All
Right,
been together.
right, sure.
And I'm sure no intelligent white person watching this show, or no intelligent white man in his or her right white mind, want Black boys and Black girls marrying their white sons and daughters, and in return introducing their grandchildren as half brown, kinky haired Black people.
I
I'm sure
I wouldn't object to that.
Well, you wouldn't, but a lot of them would.
But I'm sure a lot of people.
And
fair use,
what I'm
fair
trying to
use.
say is this, what I'm trying to say is this. You don't have it. You say you don't, but you don't have it. You really ain't gonna have it. You on the show and you gotta say that. But
That's not true.
why would you want to do that?
Because
you
I
love
don't
yourself?
think I'm any different from you see.
Yeah, we much different.
I mean, I think society's made us
You know
different.
we're different. We all together.
Society's made us different.
No, not society. God made us different.
No, we're just human beings. He made all of us.
We all listen. Bluebirds fly with bluebirds. Red birds want to be with red birds. Listen. Tell me when I'm wrong. Pigeons want to be with pigeons.
But
Tell
we
me
have
when I'm wrong.
intelligence.
Well,
We have an
we
intellect
must.
they
Well, we
don't
should have.
have.
They don't have intelligence, but yet
No.
they stay together. We should have more intelligence than them, right? Buzzards are with buzzards. Right? Buzzards are with buzzards. Bluebirds are with bluebirds. They all are birds, but they've got different cultures. The eagles like to hang out in the mountains. The buzzard like to fly around the desert.
Well, there is
The
certain-
bluebird like to fly around the trees
There'll
and
be
the
certain
grass.
problems a buzzard mating with a sparrow, wouldn't there?
What?
There'll be certain.
Right. And that's
I
we
mean-
have the problems too.
No,
I don't see no Black and white couples in England or America walking around proud, holding their children
That's because society.
and going out.
That's society's fault. I mean, we've got to educate people around it.
Well, life is too short for me to be catching hell for something like that. I'd rather go and be my own. I have a beautiful daughter, beautiful wife. They look like me. We're all happy, and I don't have no trouble. I have no trouble. I ain't that much in love with no woman to go through all that hell. Ain't no one woman that good. You understand?
I understand. Yeah, I do understand.
So,
I
family,
think it's sad
our
that-
late and great Muhammad Ali even talked about integration and interracial marriage, which is another form of
Yeah, because I want
integration.
my child to look
And
like.
what we need to understand is that far too long, even since MLK, 60 years ago petitioned to Lyndon B. Johnson in order for us to have civil rights, which is another form of integration. The only thing we essentially needed and wanted was to be left alone. We was in our own economic state in black business districts, and some people even call them African towns to a certain degree. But there were black business districts, aka Black Wall Streets, that we were systemically, economically doing well. But time after time, every time that black Americans pulled themselves up by their bootstraps, so to speak, white supremacy, Red Summer of 1919, comes to destroy, kill anything that we can essentially create. But the stereotype is that black Americans are lazy, especially from immigrants from all countries, not just our African immigrants, but Asian immigrants, Hispanic immigrants. That is the one term. And it's such a tied term. I mean, when are we going to get rid of this? Oh, they're lazy. I mean, who's lazy? But I digress with that. But when we really look at this and we define it, first, let's define integration. The practice of uniting people from the different races in an attempt to give people equal rights within racial integration. Or we can look at it as racial passing occurs when a person classified as a member of a racial group, because we understand that a lot of black people and a lot of Hispanic people, just to mention them for a moment there, try to pass as white when they can. Now, we've had some black riders who essentially were covert operatives to give us information. But a lot of our black Americans, especially back in the 60s and 70s, tried to pass as white in order to obtain white privilege. Now, historically, the term has been used primarily in the United States to describe a black or brown person or of multiracial ancestry who assimilated into the white majority to escape the legal and social conventions of racial segregation and discrimination. Now, we have this on larger terms. We call them Oreos, we call them Coons, we call them Sambos. Those who try to 100% directly assimilate into white culture for white acceptance, for trinkets, bags, and some benefits. This is why this has occurred. And we still, till this day, have people of melanated nature trying to be white accepted. Why? We want to be part of the mass majority of power. This is a power dynamic that some melanated people, some black Americans believe that if you become a turncoat within your own race, that you will be honorary white. We understand that that's impossible. You can't be honorary white. It's impossible. They're going to use you, abuse you, and just like anything else, once they finish using you, then they will oust you and they would denigrate you, like Jesse Peterson. You see him, he spoke out for years against homosexuality. Come to find out, he's turning it up for daddy. He's been buck dancing. He's been booty juicing. But let's look at it. 3 kinds of neighborhoods. This is integration, family. 3 kinds of neighborhoods: the all-white neighborhood, the all-black neighborhood, and the exceeding rare, high, unstable, racially mixed neighborhoods. It says here, some attribute it to white discrimination, pure and simple. Whites, that is, have consciously and determinedly exclude blacks from their communities. But people are stating minority choice, like Norwegians in Brooklyn, Italians in Manhattan, Little Italy, Black Americans, they explain prefer to live among their own kind. Now, this is partially true because most people, from what I can tell, want to live in a good neighborhood, no matter the color. But most likely, Black Americans want to live in great neighborhoods with Black Americans. But those are hard to find because of what? Discrimination, economic depravity. We look at these things and we understand that we may have to live in a neighborhood that's not majority Black. We understand these things. And some people will like to call those who want to live at a higher standard traitors or coons. that we must live in dilapidated neighborhoods because we simply made a way for ourselves and live in better neighborhoods. Now, segregation is driven mainly by income differences across racial groups. This is partially true because there's poor Hispanic neighborhoods, there's poor white neighborhoods, there's poor Asian. I don't think there's any poor Asian neighborhoods, especially not in America. I haven't seen them yet, but it's probably one or two. And there's, of course, poor black neighborhoods. But stating here, it says that segregation is driven mainly by income. Or is it? Now, segregation, as we know, like redlining and the new term gentrification, this is mostly ran by race. It also states here that almost all agree that when Black Americans do manage to gain a foothold in a previously all-white community, the whites move away in droves, a phenomenon well known as white flight. This takes me for you. And with that came a mass amount of Black Americans for jobs, servants, drivers, working at food restaurants, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, where the Black population rose to 70%, which now coined the term at that time, Chocolate City. Now we see a reversal of Chocolate City. Now we're kind of getting like Milk City or Milkland or Milktown, where if you went to Washington, D.C. right now, there still is around 30 to 40% Black American for the most part, but you will start to see that those Black neighborhoods, those Black ghettos, those Black hoods, Black prominent neighborhoods where Black people own houses throughout the entire eastern seaboard, that now those neighborhoods are white. And this is because of gentrification. Now, some people like to believe that, a lot of these neighborhoods were ghettos and slums, and that these white developers have to come in and beautify the city. No, this was all by design. The only thing they did, family, was take redlining and redistribute it through DC because white people wanted to come out the suburbs, driving 2, 3, 4, 5 miles to the store, and they wanted to enjoy the city life. Now you see a reversal where a lot of Black Americans are now living in suburbs. At one point in time, suburbs were very expensive to live in. Now the suburbs around DC are cheaper to live in than the city. It's quite amazing. It's quite amazing. So we have to look at these things with a very broad eye, and we have to look at them very intricately, because the way we simply look at things at face value, they have a deeper meaning. Let me tell you why. This study was done by these two immigrant doctors here, and it's not a bad study at all. It says nearly 90% of Americans are in favor of marriages between Black and white people, and yet the rate of interracial marriage remains relatively low, as less than 1% of all marriages. It goes on to say, today, 87% of Americans say they approve marriages between Black and white people. Is that so? However, the response changed dramatically when they asked more directly about how they feel if one of their close relatives wants to marry outside their race. This is where the rubber meets the road. When you start to ask direct questions, hey, would you want your son or daughter, your sister or brother to marry a Black person? Oh, well, I believe in family integrity and we have a lineage, and you start getting all these excuses. But again, family, why is this story even curated? To inform people of how Black people are well acceptant of any other race except for their own. In some instance, don't get me wrong. It states here that 54% of Blacks are in favor of their close relative marrying a white person. The result is lower for whites. That's what it says. Among whom only 1 in 4, which is 26%, say they were in favor of their close relatives marrying a Black person. And they say such findings show that interracial relations are still unfavorable in the United States. No, majority of white people do not want you to marry one of their family members. But for some reason, half of Black Americans, half of Black people in America, we're okay with you marrying someone white. This is not about being racist or discriminatory. This is about power. This is about economics. They understand, for one, they want to keep white purity within their families. That's number one. Maintain the race. Number two is about economics. It's about money. Because when white and blacks get together, when the black man gets with a white woman and he obtains any sort of wealth, he creates a will, he makes a trust. Where does that money go to, family? Where does that money go to? It goes to his white wife. So essentially, we're now increasing the economics of whites, thus by black prosperity. We have to think about these things very broadly and very deeply. Nonetheless, although the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in the 1960s that laws banning interracial sexual relations violate the 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, it was only in the last decade that anti-racial marriage laws were definitely struck down in all states, with Alabama being the last state to do in 2000. Did anyone know that? That up until 2000, you cannot have interracial marriage in Alabama, but that speaks for itself. Black-white marriages remain relatively low at 500,000. First, in terms of race, whites are still less likely to support interracial marriage as compared to blacks. White men are the most opposed to their close relative marrying a black person. That's no surprise. No significant gender difference was found among blacks, meaning that we are relatively acceptance of interracial marriage. Oh, I don't care if he's black or white, long as that he has the bag. We've heard that before. Non-Christian blacks, listen to this, non-Christian blacks held more unfavorable attitudes towards black-white marriage than Protestants. What does that actually mean? That the black church is, I'm not going to go there today, family. I'm not going to go there. You know how I get sometimes. I'm not going to go there today. I'll keep on. Ironically, people living in the South reported being in favor of black-white unions for their close relatives in 2000 more than those living elsewhere in the country. Here's another question. What is the fascination with marrying outside your race? Can I ask that question? Because most people would say, oh, it's not about race, it's about love, that love is blind. No, it's not. If you're approaching a white male or white woman, or vice versa, they're approaching you, you know what race they are. You know what color they are. So love is not blind. Now, if that's what you're attracted to, then say that. Live with that. Stand 10 toes down on that. But don't say that love is blind. Love is not blind, family. You know who you are being with. You know that who you are dating. So don't say love is blind. It states here the number of black-white marriages has risen in recent decades. From the 1960s at 51,000 to 2010, over 500,000. However, the numbers of such marriages are still relatively tiny relative to same-race marriages. Yet when asked about their general attitudes toward black-white marriages, 9 in 10 Americans claim they approve of such unions. Family, you see how this report here is contradictory to the numbers versus what people are saying. We're stating that white men are the most opposed to interracial marriage. And then it states here that in first terms of race, whites are still less likely to support interracial marriage as compared to blacks, meaning that we are so damn accepting that we don't understand that race, not discrimination, but race has to do with power dynamic. That's what we must understand. I see we have Finding Life, Channel Victoria, and Focus Willis. Nice to see you people in the room today. Hopefully you guys understand what I'm putting down, because white acceptance is largely inclusive to integration. We're going to move on. Working while black, because integration comes in all forms, family, even in corporate America, even working at the Denny's in the white neighborhood. It really doesn't matter. And I have one little quick excerpt here that I want to go over. It states here that over half of black employees have felt racism at work. Raise your hand as you have. I'm raising mine. One study shows only 3.2% of executives and senior managers level employees are black. and only 5 Fortune 500 CEOs are. Black men are paid 13% less than white men. Black women are paid 39% less than white men and 21% less than white women, according to another study. They ask for promotions and raisins about the same rate as white women, but they get worse results. And I've even heard stories of black men and women asking for raises and actually getting laid off and fired anywhere from 2 weeks to a month later. Discrimination and racism because of integration has occurred more rapidly. When you listen to our late and great civil rights leaders about integration and what it would do for Black Americans, they have been presently and historically wrong. We are in a worse economic condition that we were in the 20s, in the 30s, in the 50s, and in the 60s. And the reason why there's a time gap there, family, because before the Red Summer of 1919, Black people were doing economically well in this country because coming out of slavery, who were the group of people who had all the skills of building and carpentry and farming? Black people. So essentially, we sought to obtain wealth very rapidly. But during the Red Summer of 1919, you can look that up, how sailors came home and destroyed all the major cities where all the Black people had the jobs and businesses and houses. They began to kill, steal, and just plummet these Black business districts, okay? Now, as we move on here, why so many organizations stay white, okay? We won't be here too long, family. I have some highlighted versions I want to go over here. Bear with me. It says, even though discrimination has been officially outlawed and most organizations would never say they're racist, exclusion is visible in many organizational processes. These range from race-neutral grooming codes that coincidentally target Black hairstyles to, and we're going to reference the Crown Act, to the white normatively built into seemingly non-racial organizational exceptions. For example, many elite jobs use nebulous notions of fit or collegiate and end up hiring new employees with similar backgrounds to the existing white workforce, meaning they fire Black workers, hire white ones back. Discrimination is also built into the routine ways organizations do business. White corporations may undermine anti-discrimination law as courts see the presence of diversity policies as good faith efforts. Predominantly white corporations like Airbnb may fuel gentrification by reducing access to affordable housing. And white banks may siphon resources from Black communities through discriminatory mortgage lending that redistributes Black wealth to white banks. See, what's very important about that last part is that white banks actually are in cahoots of gentrification with white developers. And I'm going to read that again so you understand what I'm getting at. White banks may siphon resources from Black communities through discriminatory mortgage lending that redistributes Black wealth to white banks. That's not allowing you to get the same rate loan, even with the same credit score as your white counterparts. That's very important. And it says gentrification like Airbnb by reducing affordable housing. This is how they go about gentrifying, and it is another form of redlining. Let's just keep it a buck. It's another form of redlining. Last but not least, Supreme Court declared in its landmark unanimous decision, Brown versus Board of Education, that separates schooling of Black and white children was inherently unequal, marking the dawn of the modern civil rights movement. Over the next 20 years, the civil rights revolution put in place laws that attempted to guarantee, essential for the first time since our nation's founding, that no one should be restricted in their access to education, jobs, voting, travel, public accommodations, or housing because of race. For most people, this was what integration meant. Blacks, whites, Latinos, Asians, and Native Americans not share social space. but our public institution, our workplaces, and our schools were no longer to be divided into separate domains with access to the best opportunities determined by skin color. What occurred with this, family? What occurred with this, they took black tax dollars and redistributed that to white neighborhoods. See, within the neighborhood, within the community, you are essentially your own economic powerhouse. But what occurred is because homes in black communities are not worth as much as white communities, redlining, gentrification, then they receive majority of the tax dollar, thus having better schools, better equipment, better facilities, books up to date, etc. But who money are they using? Not only are they using their community dollars, but they're also using the same community dollars within the same county as the black residents. We have to look deep when it comes to discrimination and integration. While we accept these values in the abstract, we are mostly pretending that they are true. At the dawn of the 21st century, the ideas of integration and equality of opportunity still elude us, okay? They get away from us, and we're not being honest or forthcoming about it. There is a national cognitive dissonance, cognitive dissonance when it comes to integration. It shows through in a New York Times poll on racial attitudes. 85% of whites said in response to a poll question that they did not care whether they live in an area where most of their neighbors were white or most were black. But in response to another question, 85% of whites also said they actually live in areas where they have no or few black neighbors. The majority of Americans say they support integration, but this is not the reality that the majority of us actually live. Majority of Americans live with people that look like them. When I go to Frisco, I see in some neighborhood hubs, majority of Indian Asians, meaning people from the East Indies. When I go to certain neighborhoods in Dallas, I see majority black. And I go to certain neighborhoods in Dallas, I see majority white. When I go to Collin County, I see majority white. Yeah, there are some black families, Asian families, but majority of people tend to move and live with people that are culturally the same and that mirror their same look. The question is, has integration benefited Black Americans or has it hindered us? So many Black people wish they could be white instead of making our race great again. I cannot agree with you, Focus Williams. And not to give any Black people any outs. Yes, our people have been tormented. We have been discriminated upon. Present day, not even going back to the days of Jim Crow or the Black codes or even slavery. I'm talking about present day. That we suffer majority of our harm, our hardships, murder, death, all of those things from the hands of the race soldiers with and without badges. Where's the audience and why was this record to me? I'm Mexican. I don't know my Mexican brother. I have no idea. Maybe deep down inside, you understand that your abuela is actually African descent. Maybe that's why it was probably presented to you. And that's another thing. A lot of Hispanics try to hide the fact that a lot of their ancestors have African ancestry. See, there's this town down in Mexico. I think it's Veracruz is the town that is majority Black Mexican. You rarely hear about this town, but majority of the population are Black Mexicans or Afro-Mexicans, just like Dominican Republic. Their president looks sort of a high hue yellow tone, but majority of Dominicans are dark skinned, or at least brown, medium tone to dark skin. So everybody tries to hide their Blackness, especially here in America, because they understand the racism and discrimination and the brutality because of your skin color. And as a Hispanic, don't forget, in America, They do not label Hispanics as a race, but they label them as an ethnic. So essentially, Hispanics can label themselves as white or black, but we understand that majority of Hispanics, majority of them, can't say all, label themselves as white. So with that being said, understand the power dynamic in America and understand how people that look like you may not be for you. And most of them, especially in the Democratic Party, because we already know about Republican blacks for the most part. Not all Republican blacks, but especially those boot-licking coons in the Democratic Party are just looking for integration and white acceptance.